Well, I'm inviting a guest. I guess I invited a guest on Square Peg Round Hole today. Jeff Goins is, well, if you look at his social media and his website, he's going to tell you he's a blogger and a podcaster and a best selling author and many roles that he plays, many times that we think this is how we, define ourselves. And Jeff, you're so much more than that. And one of those things is generous and gracious with your time. So thanks for taking time to have a conversation with me today.
Thanks, Tim. Happy to be here.
Yeah. As we started chatting a little bit ago, we've got some connections, but this is our first face to face connection.
Mm.
So I'm grateful again. But
Likewise.
Jeff, one of the things that intrigued me right off the bat, and one of the reasons I wanted to have a conversation with you today, is not just because you were a generous guy and did an endorsement for my book Alone Sucks, and I don't think I've done anything for you, but except take advantage of you again today. Back in November of 2021, I was struck with a social media post, and I wrote it down because I didn't want to get it wrong. That really resonated with me because, as you know, this podcast is intended to help people live with authenticity. Whether we're going to hit that goal or not, I think it's going to be a great learning curve because I'm learning what authenticity means. You said this. You said, fake it till you make it makes you a liar. And I'm all about harnessing the power of belief to do the impossible. But if your life is not the result of your thinking, then you've got no integrity. And some of us aren't making it, we're just faking it. And it's time to tell the truth. I just was curious of like, was there an impetus to that? If you can remember why you posted that. And I'd love to unpack that a little bit with you because you hear that all the time. Fake it till you make it, but that's a crappy plan, right?
Right. And there's a lot of nuance there. First of all, you said some kind but somewhat self-effacing things that I wanted to address. Uh, and it reminded me of first of all, I'm here because I want to be here, not because I'm feel like
I
I'm
know.
especially nice or generous. And I endorsed your book because I thought it was a good book. And I'm here because I thought we could have an honest conversation. And
Yeah.
this is the first podcast interview I've done in probably 6 months because most of them are, um, you know, dudes with mics who want to talk about hacking this, that, or the other thing. And I'm not really interested in hacking life anymore. I want to experience it. And that you seem to be somebody who's at least curious about that. And I'm always interested in getting into the stuff of life and talking about it because life is amazing and hard and
Yeah.
incredible and it's beautiful to talk about life itself, not just the idea of it. So I'm happy to be here, and it reminded me of when I started my blog. I um, I, I was lucky enough to make friends with Michael Hyatt, who is a well-known name in the writing and publishing and blogging world, especially at that time. And I was just lucky enough to ask him to coffee, and he said yes. And there was just a series of coincidences that made that happen. And then I at that time was writing and publishing a new article on my blog every single day because that's how I was trying to get noticed in the world. And there was and he started to notice it, and I started like sharing them, like, hey, I wrote this. Like when you start like making stuff, you want people to see it, right? Like, yeah, I, I
Exactly.
I would like write songs as a teenager, and then I'd want to play them for my friends. I would like want to and not want to, right? Like I made this thing and it wants to be shared because it's an expression of life. I think art is an expression of life, and I'm scared to do it at the same time. And but I shared one or two articles with him, and I said, hey, I wrote this thing, and whatever. And I wanted affirmation, and I probably part of me probably wanted him to share it or whatever. Um, but one week there was a series of articles. There were a series of things that happened. I wrote and published 5 articles 5 days in a row because that's what I was doing. I was writing an article every single day, a blog post every single day, and publishing it. Some of them were good, a lot of them were not, but it helped me kind of practice the craft of writing in front of people. And Michael had about 100,000 people following his Twitter. And in those days, if you tweeted something like a link, people paid attention to it. And so 5 days in a row, every single day, Monday through Friday, he shared one of my articles, sending hundreds of people to my website every single time he did this, which was a big deal to me. It was, and by the end of the week, it was overwhelming. And I sent him a direct message on Twitter, thanking him and telling him to stop. I said, thanks for doing this. I really appreciate it. It's very generous. And you can stop now because it's overwhelming. And he said, Jeff, I don't know what you're talking about. I have a commitment to my audience to share good stuff with them. And I think you write good stuff. And so I'm going to keep sharing it. And, I just thought of that when you were calling me generous. It reminds me of when the woman that I love says, thanks for being patient with me. And I'm like, I'm not being patient with you. I just love you. Like that doesn't, I don't feel like I'm practicing patience in offering love to somebody that I care deeply about. And I don't feel like I'm being generous to you when I'm having a conversation that feels important to me. So I just wanted to say that.
Well, I appreciate that, and don't take that lightly. What I hear you saying, and what crosses my mind is, I think the reason it stands out, Jeff, is because that's kind of an anomaly in our world, that we expect that if we give, there's an ulterior motive, or we've got to we have to receive back.
Yeah.
You can't just care for people, love people. I've got this new thing where when I encounter people, I did it into the grocery store. Actually, it's in the hardware here in town just a couple hours ago. And a couple people standing there, and I just silently wish them love, joy, peace, and happiness.
Yeah.
You know,
That's great.
because maybe just by giving, whether I say it out loud, I could give them a flower or a tip or note, but just to give because it comes from who I am. Yeah, I don't need to recognize for that. That's not true. Sometimes I want recognized for that.
Totally.
If I'm being 100% honest. Sometimes I want someone to notice what I'm doing and giving.
Yep.
But it's your character. It's a character that we all need to develop more of.
Yeah. And I would say this is a bit of an abstraction, but I would say, like, I don't want you to pay me back. Why would you rob me of the gift of giving by like recompensating me? Now we're even,
Right.
and I don't want to be even, and I don't want to be owed, and I don't want to be in debt. I think human beings have to learn how to give and receive, and also understanding the necessity of trading, right? Like there's a reason that like our modern world, the system of how most economic structures work right now is essentially trading, right? It started with major ports, right? Not to get all sociological here, but um, like I give you something, you give me something, now we're even, right? You give me that ukulele or mandolin or whatever this on your wall. I get,
Bazooki. It's a
yeah,
bazooki.
yeah, I've seen those. Those are cool. Um, I'll give you this hat. Is that fair? Are we even? Cool. You have something I want. I have something you want. Let's trade. And then we created money as a fiat, right? As sort of a, hey, that thing is probably worth this many pieces of paper, and so here I'll give you this, and then I'll go buy that, and it's it's like a I don't know, it's a fiat, right? It's a replacement. I was trying to think of a less snooty way to say fiat. Anyway, there's nothing wrong with trading, but trading in itself is not all that life is made of, right? Life is a gift. I didn't cause myself to be. You didn't cause yourself to be. I'm not even causing myself to continue to exist. I'm not thinking about breathing. I'm not striving to be here right now. And so, in that sense, I've received something, and it makes sense. I like what's his face, the guy who wrote The Gift. Who's a sociologist. I'll look it up and send it over. There's a book called The Gift, and it's about how art is a gift, and every gift wants to keep moving, otherwise it starts to wither. And so a good gift is one that keeps moving. And so if I give you something and then you give it to somebody else and they give it to somebody else, whether it's a physical thing or an act of kindness, this is where the whole concept of paying it forward works. Like if I give you something and you give me something back, we both kind of feel fine, right? We're like back to zero. But if I give you something that maybe even required a little bit of sacrifice on my part and you're elated by it, that feels good to me usually, right?
Yeah.
And then if you go do that same thing for somebody else, that feels good to you. This, I think, is the gift of life. You were given something, so you actually have to receive, right? And then you get to like share that thing or the essence of that thing with somebody else. I think that's when life starts to get really interesting, really exciting. We've been given this gift called life, and we can keep sharing it with other people in lots of different ways.
That's true economy, right? That's the true economy we need to. It's the giving and receiving, right? The law of giving and receiving.
Yeah. And
I
you're right. You've got to learn to receive too. Like it's that you can I think you can only, I'm making this up. I think this is true, but I think you can only give in so much as you're capable of receiving.
I think that is true. I actually repeat that law, just like 7 laws I repeat to myself lately. And I've been reading a lot of Deepak Chopra
Yeah.
lately, and which aligns with exactly this conversation.
Yep.
A lot of things that people may think, well, that's far beyond my comprehension or my faith or my lack of faith, or but you only keep things going. So today I'm willing to give the things that really matter, the gift of caring, the gift of compassion, the gift of love, the gift of joy. If I can keep them moving in my life and keep expending them, then I can receive them. But
Yep.
it's like, I've got to empty the bucket in order to receive something, but I've
Yep.
got to be willing. I've got to be willing to receive.
Yeah. And you're, I mean, this might sound a little woo woo, and that's fine, but you become this conduit of energy.
Yeah, no, it's conduit. Yeah,
And if you hold on to some of that, it does start to wither. And in my experience, you can't hoard love. You can't like,
true.
this is that whole story of reference of Jesus saying, you're putting all this stuff into these storehouses, and that's where moths and rust are gonna tear it apart, because you can't hold on to life. You can't hold on to a moment. It's always moving. By the way, the name of that book is The Gift, and the author is Lewis Hyde. It's not an easy book to read, but what he does is he analyzes all these ancient cultures, and he basically says the role of an artist in society traditionally has been to be a giver to society, and it is society's job to repay them by taking care of them. And it's only um, modern times that have sort of corrupted the idea of art, that this is something that you should sell and get compensated for. You should be taken care of so that you can continue to give your gift to the world. But this idea that you're going to make something and sell it to the world, he argues that's a very new thing. And he illustrates this by some old fable that I can't remember, but it's some old, he's an anthropologist, so it's some ancient culture's fable about whatever generosity, but it's about this, like, I don't know, piece of bread or something that this and I'm butchering it and it's fine, but this family bakes this piece of bread and they like give it to a neighbor, and when one if when they keep passing the bread on, it keeps feeding everybody. Again, this sounds familiar, right? Feeding of the 5,000, right? Same concept. These stories are myths for a reason. They represent deeper truths about existence right now, not something that may have happened a long time ago. That's
Right.
my take on it. And so if you keep passing this thing around, this source of life, bread, sustenance, it keeps feeding more people. If you hold on to it, it turns moldy, it rots, and it's no good to anybody.
Right. When you
So,
get rid of
yeah,
it, it regenerates. Right. It just is a regenerative process that
that,
when you give it away, it regenerates, it grows, it flourishes. Everyone receives when everybody
yeah,
gives. Eventually, you have to choose to receive it.
life, I believe, big capital L life cannot end. Um, because all life creates new life, right? Like e- even when you die and turn to whatever you turn into, like physically you decompose into the ground, worms come and eat you, you become a source of food for other creatures.
Well,
And it, yeah,
it's the idea that we're energy,
yeah,
right? And I subscribe to that. I'm energy. I was energy before I became into existence. So when I cease to physically exist, because I can't destroy the energy. I think that's
yeah,
why referring to Jesus called us the light of the world.
yeah,
I mean, so many people misinterpret that. What he's saying is, listen, just be light. You're light anyway. You can't help but to be light, so
yeah.
shine.
You can't not be. Um, anyway, so that's a long-winded way of getting around to your question, which is fake it till you make it. Um, I mean, that was, yeah, a pretty pointed reaction to a thing that I see in my world. I'm an author, as you know, and um I come from a ministry background. I've moved into kind of personal development, self-help space. A lot of people I know are in that space. And there's definitely a subculture, especially on the image conscious part of the internet, i.e., Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, a lot on Instagram these days, at least, for my age demographic. I pretend to understand TikTok, but don't really care to. But but what I see is a lot of people projecting an image to the world of success, and then other people copying that image, and then they project that to other people, and you see this a lot in the self-help world, and I think you see it, I certainly saw it in the ministry world a lot, where you are regurgitating the ideas from somebody else, not knowing that they're just regurgitating it from someone else. I
Yeah.
remember, I don't know how religious we want to get here, and that's fine, but I remember one time feeling quite disaffected with my experience of church and Christian spirituality as I experienced it. And I remember sitting around this big farmhouse table on our back porch at the time, in this like small group, this Bible study group. And I was just sort of like, hey guys, what are we doing? And they go, what do you mean, what are we doing? I said, well, as I understand it, a long time ago, something happened. Maybe God did something, or somebody interpreted God as doing something, and they wrote it down, and we call that the Bible, right? Yeah. And every Sunday, we have this guy who tells us these stories and tells us what it means, right? Right. And our job, because we were very, expository, exegetical, good evangelical church, we were talking about the sermon. Let's apply the sermon to our lives, right? Like we're trying to stay focused, in the word, on the message, very Protestant. And I said, so we get together every Wednesday night and we talk about the sermon and we apply it to our lives, right? Yeah. And then if we're really, really like zealous or ardent, we're going to share what we learn, this message, with somebody else. We're going to call that evangelism, right? Right. Okay. So something happened, and then somebody wrote about that. So talking about a thing that happened in written word, and then uh, the pastor, the preacher, is talking about those words. So now we're talking about doing something, right? And now we're getting here talking about what the pastor said, the message, right? And applying it to our lives. Makes sense. So we're talking about a thing that happened. And now if we go like proselytize and evangelize and tell the world, now we're talking about the thing. And they said, yeah, what's your point? I said, when do we get to the thing? And they said, well, what's the thing? I said, exactly.
Exactly.
I don't know. But I was tired of being in a community of people that, in my experience, this might sound a little bit harsh, I was tired of being in a community of people that also seemed to not know, right? A spiritual teacher that I enjoy is a guy named Anthony Demello. Uh, if you like Deepak, you'd love Demello.
I've read
Um,
all. I think I've read all Demello.
yeah, Demello's got this great story about the fire. And he said, once it's a fable, once a long time ago, there was a man who discovered fire. And he goes to all of these different tribes sharing the gift of fire. Doesn't want anything, not selling anything, not trading anything. It's fire. It'll keep you warm. You can use it to cook meat, food. It's good. It's a good invention.
Yeah.
It'll keep you from dying, and make your life more comfortable. Really good thing. So he goes and he shares fire with, tribe to tribe, city to city, etc. And then he comes to this one particularly religious community. He shares the gift of fire. The priests, who are kind of in control of how things go there, they don't like that very much because they can see how much the people like him and are drawn to the fire maker. And so they kill him, right? They plot to assassinate him, they kill him, and then people start to get a little suspicious. And so, to distract people from the fact that they killed the fire maker, who was getting more power and attention and influence than they were getting, they venerate him. They build little churches and put his picture up on the wall, and they celebrate and ritualize the fire maker. This guy who just wanted people to have fire is now being worshipped in all these places of worship, these churches and cathedrals and whatnot. And they practice the ancient rites and rituals of making fire. They do all the things, they worship him, they venerate him, they sing about him, but they don't make fire. There's no fire. And Demello goes, "Where's the fire?" And that's the end of the
Yeah.
story. So I I mean, now we're mixing all kinds of things. We're talking about, the internet and a culture of self-help that's addicted to giving advice. We're also talking about spirituality, which I became pretty disaffected with because um, I was going, where's the fire? We're talking about it. We're worshiping the words that are supposed to be the thing, but what is the actual thing? What is it? Is it joy? Is it peace, patience, kindness, gentleness, self-control? Where do we get those things? How do we get those things? And I understand how a religion works. You practice these things so that you get to the thing. I found in my experience of the Christian religion, I'm not talking about spirituality. I'm not talking about worship, connection, oneness with God, source, universe. I'm talking about doing stuff, right? I was doing a lot of stuff that was completely disconnected from the point of it in my experience. And I got so sick of it, I had to just stop for a while. And I wanted to get to the thing, the experience of being alive. Joseph Campbell says, we are not looking, we're not actually searching for the meaning to life. That is wrong. We are searching for the experience of being alive. That's true. That's bliss, I think. Meaning, I'm sorry, Viktor Frankl, with all due respect, that is not all there is to life. And actually, not what I think Frankl was talking about in Man's Search for Meaning. He was talking about the experience of being here right now, good, bad, right, wrong, horror, happiness, all of it. All you can do actually as a human being is be here. Like that is, and make some meaning out of it. And of course, we're all always doing that. But when I hear people say, fake it till you make it, what I hear them saying is, do a thing so that someday it'll pay off, maybe later. And I got really sick of that promise because my experience, Tim, and I think part of the story and I've observed it from the outside looking in, is I was trying really hard to be a good guy. I was following the rules. I was being nice. I was trying to succeed. I was doing everything I possibly could to get to a place that was amorphous. I didn't know what it was. It was kind of obscure, but it was something like happiness, joy, love, contentment, heaven. All of these things were somewhat interchangeable with me. I was going, someday this will all be worth it. But right now it kind of sucks.
But it
And
never
that's,
penetrated, right? It just never
I wasn't,
penetrated.
I wasn't there for it.
Right.
And I started to go, is this going to be my whole life?
Yeah.
Killing myself a little bit right now so that someday it's going to pay off and then eventually maybe just dying. And then what? Maybe it won't pay off. Maybe that's not it. Maybe heaven is here right now. Maybe the kingdom of God is here and now, and I need to get into this experience right now. So, when you, as an advice giver to the world, whether you're a preacher or an Instagram influencer or whatever, if you're throwing around advice, first of all, I met enough of my heroes to realize they were just as bankrupt as I was. They were just as lonely, just as depressed, just as unhappy or chasing the next carrot as I was. That I started to go, maybe they don't know something I don't know. Or at least I'm not just going to assume they know it because they have all the right words. I'm going to watch their life. I'm going to experience what it's like to be with them. And then maybe I'll listen to the words. And so fake it till you make it to me is something like saying, lie to yourself long enough that you believe it. And one day you can no longer separate the story you're telling the world from who you actually think you are. And at that point, you start to, in the words of Parker Palmer, disintegrate. You start to fall apart. And most of us are, I think, based on what I understand about developmental psychology, most of us do not actually get the opportunity to face the illusion we've been showing the world and see its falseness for what it is. This is a great grace to realize that you've been lying to yourself and the world and understand that who you are is something other than your titles, accomplishments, and even the best face you show to the world. And when I started to see that, one, my life started falling apart. And two, I actually started to get an understanding of this concept of bliss, of heaven, of being here now. And so fake it till you make it. No, thanks. I'm going to start here and be with who I am and who I'm becoming in this moment. And then I've got agency. I can go where I want to go and do what I want to do, but I'm done with the lies. And I'm sure as shit done with listening to people who don't know how to be honest with themselves, because I know enough people who are faking it till they make it. And they're not in integrity. They're not people that are honest. They're not people that I can trust. They're always deferring what's happening now for some big payoff later. This is about to happen. I'm about to make a bunch of money or become a big whatever. I don't care. Who you are now is it. That's who you are now. And who you are now is practicing who you're going to become later. There is no later. There is only now that is happening in another now. And so faking it till you make it, after many decades of careful study, I have come to learn doesn't work.
No, it doesn't work. And I'm a few years older than you and have battled a lot of what you've been. So I grew up in a very performance based, faith based home. Don't know that I even realized it, but it began disintegrating on me. It's probably been disintegrating on me numerous times in life, but I didn't give myself permission because I didn't have permission and I didn't know I had to give myself permission to question, to worry, to doubt. There was something wrong with all that. So a
Sure.
couple of years ago, and I haven't talked about this much on the podcast, I will dedicate a few episodes to it. Um, March of 20, uh, life began to really get challenging with health crisis. And a lot of people go through worse health crises than I've been through. I've got a very rare nerve disorder that is excruciatingly painful unless I stay up on medication. I stay up on medication because I'm doing everything I can to avoid a craniotomy. And, that doesn't
Ouch.
sound like joy to me. And I probably don't have enough bourbon in my office. Well, that's probably not true. I have plenty of bourbon in my office.
thank you for thank you for being honest and authentic.
People walk through and they go, "This is our you're a pastor, right?" Yeah, yeah. That's why I'm a happy pastor. Um, and so between that and then inadvertently finding a brain aneurysm,
Wow,
and so which I
it's a
still
big
deal
deal.
with because yeah, it's a big deal. Um, I pretend it's not a big deal, but hey, you know what? I know I've got it, and so I'm going to live every day um, because the risk of surgery is might be more severe than the risk of rupture.
Mm.
I got to the point, Jeff, in my own journey, my own faith, where I just said to hell with it. There's got to be something different. I began reading and investigating, exploring things that I probably ignored for a long time. So when you talk about this issue of everything is in the now and the power of now and being in the present, in order to divorce myself from practices, principles, perhaps illusions that I've accepted, I cut myself off from the source. I cut myself off from the creator or the universe or consciousness or God or
Sure.
whatever our audience wants to call that that being, right? And I basically said, I'm done. Screw you. And I've got no use for whatever you are anymore. I shared that with a handful of people. Man, people do not let you feel. People do not let you ponder and consider and be mad and be angry. They're like, well, you shouldn't feel that way. And so we already live in a society that many of the things you're talking about faking it, we don't know there is an alternative
Yeah.
to faking it.
Yeah. Yeah, which is like, and I appreciate the earnestness of it, which is try really hard and one day your hard work is going to pay off. And
Sure.
that's fine. That is a part of being alive, and that's a part of how life works, and we certainly trade gratification now for gratification later. I get that. But when your identity, right, is tied to this thing, fake it till you make it. I used to say, believe it till you become it. Now I'm kind of like, just be that.
Just be.
I think you and I in our Midwestern uh, American Protestant Judeo-Christian work ethic have this uh, conditioning that says if you just be, you're not going to do anything. That's not true. The tree, which just being, is not doing anything. It's growing. It's, if you ever watched or read Lord of the Rings, like they have the ents, the like tree people. They move very slowly and talk very slowly and take a long time to make decisions. And then when it's go time, it's go time. Trees live a lot longer than we do, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so our perspective of a tree is probably something like an ant or a fly's perspective of us, which is, flies like, we're like kind of like sitting down for hours a day. It's like, what are you doing? You're doing nothing. We all have different ways of being. I'm way more interested in finding, what is it that I am, and how do I partner with that in a conscious way. I don't think that means sitting still. When I am so still that I'm not moving, I'm still doing things. I think this is the point of meditation that I didn't get, and still probably don't fully get, is the more still you get, the more life seems to come alive. You can't get away from being, isness, God. It is that which is. And so prayer, meditation, slowing down, lowering your vibration through deep breaths,
Yeah.
oming, humming, whatever, you go, oh, I'm actually not alone. I can't be alone. Not in a cosmic universal sense. Um, for me, faking it till you make it was a lot of frantic energy. It was a lot of performance. I remember in the middle of COVID, I finally got serious about trauma. I got out of talk therapy and started meeting with a trauma therapist, and realized I had some stuff that actually had to move through my body, emotions that had to be expressed. And I was like screaming, cussing, because I was like going back to a moment in my life where I realized I performed and people liked it and I felt special. And my whole life I've believed that I was special. And that's been an identity that I wanted to protect. And I screamed. I said, I'm tired of being special. I just want to be seen.
See, that's a lot of my identity, right?
Yeah.
So I'm making this shift. Um, we'll call it midlife, as if I might live to be 102. Um, but I don't know who I am some days.
Yeah.
I'm learning who I am if I'm not in front of a microphone, on a stage, with
Right.
my name on something
Totally.
or a title. So even in a conversation today, the question consultant asked me was, what will that look like? I said, I don't know. I've never had to do that, but I'm giving myself permission. And I don't know how long it'll take. I haven't set a time frame. I'm doing something every day, and it's defining not who I am, but you actually used this in a blog you wrote. A better question is, what am I? Not who am I, but what am I? As we talk about the roles that we play in life and the sum total of those roles. But how do you not? 2005, I was sitting in an airport in Portland, Oregon. Uh, Flight delay, person sitting in the lobby with me or the airport with me, terminal with me, just asked me a question: who are you? And
Mm.
I did what everybody does. I gave a title and education and pedigree and all kinds of shit. And he just looked at me, and I've been wrestling with this for 16 years. And he said, "No, that's wrong. That's not who you are." Okay, I don't know you. So who am I? And
Yeah.
I think he completely jacked up my life.
Mm.
And I've best been getting through it. And lately, really only the last 6 months, the question, going back to not who am I, but what am I found more answers to in silence and being than I've ever experienced in doing. To the point now where I can't say every day, I try to do it every day, but life is life. I try to sit in complete, utter thoughtlessness for at least 30 minutes.
Mm.
And and I don't hear anything, I don't see any visions, but when I live my life in that time of just being, I have a sense of knowing
Yeah.
that has given me more freedom to be me, to be authentically me, to be my true authentic self than I've ever experienced through performance and doing.
Yeah. I mean, I think one of the things that the Protestant Reformation gave us, and it was a double edged sword, was it gave words to the people, right? You think about the invention of the Gutenberg Bible.
Yeah.
Um, People started reading the Bible for themselves, and it was no longer these hoity-toity Latin words that nobody understood, now being translated and distributed to the masses, and people got to sort of think for themselves. That was a wonderful thing. That kind of aligns with the Enlightenments and humanism. All this stuff kind of happens around the same time in history, and led to some human progress. I think what that also did, certainly what it meant for me, is words are everything, right? And I experienced that especially as an evangelical who tended towards the charismatic for a while, which is like you got to get a word from the Lord. God has to say something to you in the language that you speak. right? Don't trust your feelings too much because the heart is wicked, and full of deceit, And so it's like, well, I feel this, but is that true? I don't know. And nobody told me what you just said, Tim, which is like, you could sit in silence without words, without thoughts, and experience the wonder of being. And that would be incredible. That could be bliss. It could be boring. It could be a lot of things, but it's like that is it. And then I realized, oh, well, that makes sense why, like, monks are taking vows of silence and chanting these things that don't have a lot of words, but it's all about the playing with the frequencies and stuff. I have come to grips with the possibility that lately maybe I just missed it, like maybe there are plenty of people who aren't writers and analytical like me, who can just get into the wonder of being and go, that's it. That's the stuff. I think it's, an old Confucius saying, or at least has been attributed to him. Maybe Lao Tzu, I don't remember, but it's like, he who knows doesn't say, he who
Yeah.
says doesn't
Doesn't
know.
know. Right.
And I used to go, well, why doesn't he tell us if he knows? And now I realize, because you can't say it.
You can't say it. You can't explain it to
That's the
people.
beauty of that story. Moses goes, who should I tell them is sending me? And being itself goes, look, you don't, like, there's no name, you know, I am that I am. You want that? Try that. Tell them that, and
And
it's
that's how I am translates to
yeah,
be.
yeah.
I haven't
It's
I haven't been. I'm not going to become something. Just being itself. And from an ancient Hebrew standpoint, that we're created, right, from that source, from that being, to do what? To be. The bliss of being far outweighs, you know, the accomplishments of doing.
I think it was Krishnamurti who said, there's only, like, all of spirituality is just meditating on that question, who or what am I? What is the I? You said something to the effect earlier of, you know, I have to motivate myself or remind myself, or every day isn't purpose, but I'm trying to do this with myself. It's like, who is doing what to whom? That's
It's a great question.
it's fascinating to just
Yeah.
meditate on. I think some people don't care about this. They think it's esoteric, mystical, pointless. I think all of life is pointless. The point is this, it's just constant circulation of life, energy. I used to think, why would somebody go to school only to become a teacher? But as a parent, it's like you're learning to teach, to learn, to teach, to learn, to teach, to learn, to teach. That's pointless. It doesn't lead anywhere, right? I'm going to go do something with my life. But when you become a parent, you go, there is no greater fulfillment than to see life continue to express itself, to keep growing, to keep flourishing. It's winter now. Things are dead. But are they? Are they really dead? Stuff's happening. Buds, I mean, I'm in Nashville and it's not almost February, so it's practically spring, Buds are starting to form on the what we call dead trees, but they're not dead. The leaves fell. They essentially went into hibernation, and now more life is coming. What is the fun little Jurassic Park line? Life will always find a way. That is amazing to me. The mystery of existence. How does it just keep going? And I'm that, or a part of it. And I think the craziest thing is that, and it's a real mind fuck sometimes, self-consciousness. I am aware that I am. That's a loop. I mean, that just like that is an infinite recursion into I am that I am that I am that I am that I am. And I go, oh, that's being. And that's what the Bible calls God. And I am that or a part of that, or that is a part of me. Now we're treading into stuff that we would have burned at the stake for 500-600 years ago, and what
Oh no, there will be
yeah.
some who want to burn us at the stake for it today. I guarantee it.
And they killed a man 2,000 years ago for saying this. How dare he say this thing that he equates himself with God? Isn't that so interesting that our conversation started with a little bit of me going, hey man, like, you don't have to call me generous. We're just hanging out, talking, being humans. I think, and I can completely identify with that, whether we call it humility or a little bit of self-hatred. Human beings, at very least, seem to be far more than we think we are. C.S. Lewis said that you've never met a mere mortal, right? To
Well, I mean,
be,
going
yeah.
back to without wading too deep, and we've already waded into it. I've I always said when I began this podcast, we're not talking too much about religious stuff, but I don't know how you can't, right?
Yeah.
You can't. It's not about talking about a particular faith. It's talking about if we are, say, not even if, made in the image of. We use the word God because we don't know what else to call it, right? And so people get all
Yeah.
bent out of shape of what you
Sure.
call it. It's
Yeah,
because
of
you
course.
made up a name. You had to make up a name, so you made up a name.
No.
But then we teach falsely that this massive fall took place. And now we no longer, from the beginning of what we teach, see ourselves as in the image of God. We're already screwed from the beginning.
Yeah.
We're born into a false narrative. And
Yeah.
so there was never a place of health for us from which to grow until we deconstruct, or we can even say back to an earlier word, begin to disintegrate many of the systems that we hold on to for a false sense of security or a safety net.
Yeah. What I am starting to dance with is that I may have gotten all these stories wrong. I heard these stories from a certain perspective, which was 6,000 years ago. There's this guy named Adam, this woman named Eve. They did this thing, they screwed it all up, and now we've got to pay the price. And Jesus had to die for your sins, and da 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 da. I mean, that's the evangelical Christian narrative. And then I start getting into other perspectives of that story, right? Joseph Campbell has an amazing take uh,
Amazing take on it.
on the story of Garden of Eden. Jordan Peterson talks about it,
Yeah.
but it's all kind of the same thing. This is a myth. Look, this is a myth that is essentially about a fall from innocence, right? Well, guess what life is as you become more aware of your own being, of your own depth of what we call goodness and badness, what you are capable of. Look, I've hurt people. I just have, mostly without trying, sometimes on purpose. I have. And that's a reality that I have to face. That has caused feelings of guilt. It's caused feelings of defensiveness, all kinds of things. We have to grapple with what we are capable of. And at a certain point, as I'm watching my children see this, they go from innocence to maturity. And if they're lucky, they go back to a sort of reclaimed innocence, right? Which is what you're talking about. We might call it deconstruction. A construct is just a way of looking at the thing. You don't have to break it, it just sort of falls away, and you go, oh, maybe I was getting this wrong the whole time. You know, don't do this thing. I kind of want to do this thing. Don't do it. I want to. You can't do it, or this thing will happen. I'm gonna try it. That's development. That's human development. And then you see what's on the other side of it, and you go, there's consequence. And what I love about the meta narrative of the Bible, or at least how I'm reclaiming it these days, is you go from a garden to a desert to a city, right? You don't go back to the thing. I always find it weird when evangelicals like mourn the loss of the Garden of Eden, like we're trying to get back into the garden. This, I think, is a metaphor of moving from innocence to maturity, which is just the story of life, how we make sense of our own being. And you want to get back to that feeling you had when you were 8 years old and you were riding your bicycle and it was amazing. And you were
I'm just
never
trying to
getting
get back
back
to
there.
I'm just trying to get back to 172 pounds.
And you're
You know.
never getting back there,
Well,
whatever it is. You know what I'm saying?
thanks for killing my whole hope and dream. I'm done swimming every day now. I can't
I
do it.
know,
Jeff says I can't. I'm
you
going
know,
no more intermittent fasting.
I yeah, it's like we're all trying to get back to a point where we felt a certain way. And the
Yeah,
whole horror.
there are no good old days, right? And so people talked about the good old days forever. Parents, grandparents, great grandparents talk about the good old days. Uh, Good old days remove the ability to grow and evolve and become. That's what
And it's
being does. Being helps us to become, but it's moving us forward um, out of that despair, that embarrassment, that shame that we experience.
it's not real. You can't get back there. If you tried, there'd be an angel with a flaming sword who would say, "You are thou shalt not pass." Do you, like you are not coming here. And what we are left with is the decision, I think, to mature. And the decision that human beings have to make once they are kicked out of their own respective garden, which is the illusion of their own dreams, the illusion of what we think happiness is, which is I get to a point where everything's fine. And I don't know how many more VH1 behind the scenes stories we need to understand that getting everything you want is not what life is about. It is not. One, it won't happen. You like even if you like make a I did it. I made a list, pretty much got all the things on it, and I just made another list, right? That's human nature. And I realized my list wasn't even my list, it was somebody else's list. And
That's a
I
great.
think,
That's a great point.
yeah,
Is we just adopt somebody else's
make some
definition of
make
success.
make some
Makes
money,
yeah right.
make people happy, become popular, become famous. How famous? How much money? Should I keep going? There's nothing wrong with playing these games, but they are games. And I would even say the story of sin, redemption, repentance, that can be a really fun game. I know it doesn't sound that way and this sounds glib, but being, as I understand it, is really this endless game of hide and seek, right? Now we're getting super spiritual and esoteric, and maybe you don't want to go here, but it's like if there is one consciousness that connects all things, and we're a part of that, then we have had to forget part of ourself to know part of ourself more deeply. And it,
Isn't that dying to self? Isn't that dying to self?
I think, yeah. I think that's a cool sort of iteration of it, or a reframing of it. I think who am I or what am I is a wonderful question, because the fact is you are not actually who you were yesterday. And the
Right.
question that I have enjoyed asking of myself and sometimes of others is, who would you be without the stories that you tell about yourself? Wouldn't it be so fun? They do this in therapy sometimes, like group therapy, where you go away for a week or whatever, and you can't tell people what you do, how much money you make. You can tell them your name, and then you're just there for a week. You become a different person because you're free to be. And you realize that as a being, which has its roots in beingness, whatever that is, and it is a mystery that we're endlessly trying to figure out. Um, you can become lots of things. And so the choice I think we face as human beings at a certain point, if we want, if we wake up to the fact that, oh, I chose to be that thing. I chose to be, popular, and to believe that girls didn't like me, and I played the shy guy, and whatever. And then I became a sensitive artist. And then that, caused me to hide. And then when I showed up, I was able to perform in ways that people went, wow. I mean, that's a lot of my story. Well, that was just a character, a
Yeah.
story that I believed. And when I stopped believing parts of it, I became someone else. And maturity, I think, is the act of consciously choosing which story you want to live out in your life.
You're talking about fairy tales. You're
Yeah.
talking about fantasies, right? Why do
Yes.
we create fairy tales and fantasies? To escape from our reality, but perhaps what a disservice we've done. Well, I mean, while I enjoy fairy tale and fantasy like the next person, I'd like to escape into them. If we're constantly escaping into a make believe place, we never come to the point of true reality, which is going back to understanding that I just am. And I'm okay with being. I'm just okay being. I am. I don't have to become what you want me to be. But when I'm not comfortable, I just make up a new story. I just make up a new fairy tale. I just drive around in a pumpkin with horses, right?
I think, I mean, fairy tales are a form of myth, and I think people misunderstand myths. Myths are not stories that we get lost into, detached from reality. Of course, they can function as that, and our modern understanding of myths and fairy tales is, I think, a bit has gone a bit awry. Classically, myths are ways of helping us make sense of our lives.
Yeah, they're
So
metaphorical to teach us a lesson.
a myth is a story that uh, helps you understand reality, and
Yeah.
it is necessarily simplified. It's not all myths are true in the sense that if you believe them, they become true, right? So the America is a myth. The American story, the story of the founding fathers, they're myths that we tell, that we believe, that may or may not be factually true. George Washington never chopped down a cherry tree, but it's a story that we told over and over and over again because it represented something to us, represented honesty and integrity, and those are important values in America, or have been for a while. And in the same thing is true of religious myths. These are stories that you tell yourself, may or may not have happened. We don't know. You and I don't know. We weren't there. We can believe that
Correct.
they happened. That's faith. That's cool. But perhaps there is a deeper meaning to the story of Jonah or the Garden of Eden or whatever that helps us make sense of our life today. I read the story of the Garden of Eden, the fall of man, and I go, oh, that was today. Today, I did a thing, or my child did a thing, and we didn't want to face the consequences of that decision. What happens? She says, here, eat this. Okay, I eat it. Who, like, why'd you do that? She told me to do it. Like, when somebody challenges me, even today, I can catch myself dodging responsibility. And I go, oh,
Oh,
okay,
that's what this story of
okay.
creation was about.
Yeah, I am a creation. I am a creator. I am creating my life right now. I think a life becomes really tragic when you believe the myths that you've been telling yourself about yourself without realizing the whole point of them is to get into now. They're not escapes. Don't escape into Timothy Aldred, author, speaker, pastor guy. You're not that guy. You're
Well,
you.
I'm trying to break free from that fantasy, right?
I, who's I? I am trying to break
Right.
free from that, right? You're not
Right.
that guy. Demello would say, you're not good. You're not bad. You're you, right? He would also say, if you get into consciousness, you don't need a conscience. You don't need something to tell. You don't need Jiminy Cricket to tell you if you're doing good or bad. You get here now. You become very sensitive to reality. You see your effect on people. You might make a mistake, whatever that means, right? You might do something that has an effect on somebody that doesn't feel good to them, and that doesn't feel good to you, and you can gently correct that. But if you get into now, you don't need all these abstractions. You don't need all these stories and myths and words and ideas about the thing. You get into the thing and you realize you are the thing. You're it. You're being. You are a being. You have beingness inside of you. And that is the one thing that we just can't seem to escape.
I learned more about awareness from Demello as an introduction.
Yeah.
Um, just was a tipping point into this whole idea. We began with fake it till you make it, and we've never left the topic, dude. We've actually never left the
Yeah.
topic,
Don't
even
do
though people
that.
might be saying, listeners might be saying, What are you still talking about the same thing? We're absolutely talking about the same thing. And we're still talking about the premise of the podcast, which is how do you live with authenticity,
Yeah,
right? Because everything
don't
else we've been talking about is the artificial sum of the depletion of it.
yeah. I just know, I mean, I've been a performer my whole life. You get that, Tim. I played music, I wrote poems, I acted in plays, I became a marketer, I became very religious, and all these were all masks. These were all layers between me and the world.
Sure.
And there was always somebody behind the mask, right? And the real life has become more playful for me as I've started taking off the masks and realizing who I am has not disintegrated. It is a terrifyingly liberating experience to let go of the things that you think you are and see that you still have not disintegrated. And I think that's the point of life, is to just get closer and closer to that source of being, right? It was Chesterton who wrote an orthodoxy. Chesterton grew up like staunchly Catholic, I think, became, wildly atheistic and agnostic and just, God denying, and ultimately ended up, as a Catholic again. And that book, he's a brilliant thinker and philosopher and word guy, is up there with Lewis, in my opinion. He says, and he was a novelist too. He said at the beginning of Orthodoxy, I always wanted to tell a story about a man who set sail for the New World, leaves England, gets turned around in the sea, and ends up back at on the shores of his beloved England, but thinks he's in the New World. And so he's seeing all this old stuff with new eyes, and he's like, wow, look at this. This is amazing. This is incredible. And he says that's kind of his experience with religion is, I did try to found a heresy of my own. And when I put the finishing touches on it, I learned that it was orthodoxy. I think this is the experience of being human. You leave all the things that you thought you were, only to come back to them. You're coming, you and I are coming back to the experience of being born, reborn, rebirthed
Born
into the
again.
world,
That's right.
born again as
Well,
babies,
it's
going,
just,
wow, wow, wow. It's amazing.
well, we're learning to be human again, or human in a new way, or human for the first time in many ways.
I think of it as meeting myself again for the very first time.
Great line.
I know. Yeah, it's like, that's it. You're stuck with you for the rest of your life, so you might as well get to know the mystery of what you might be.
Yeah, you're a breath of fresh air. Now that I was shocked or knew that I didn't know we were gonna go, but you've reinforced and affirmed things that I am working through. I think we're all working through because again, you don't arrive here. And so
Yeah.
there's no I figured it out. Oh, I've become authentic. No, you're constantly stripping off. I started reading a blog headline this morning or title, and I have kind of abandoned it, that says, life is better naked. And when you can completely strip all your pretenses off and expose and remove those masks, you'll feel so much better and freer and have freedom when you can live without all the weight of that, which is what being is about.
Yeah, I used to for a long time I took my kids to this trampoline park. They've kind of got bored of it. But we still sometimes go. And it's like big indoor trampoline park, jumping around, whatever. Just like a, great place for getting lots of diseases, I'm sure. Yeah, but it's fun, it's sweaty, it's a workout, and get them out, especially in the winter days. And I'm jumping around. And one day I just look up, and there is like this giant picture of an angel, like an actual like mural of like this really weird kind of goth looking comic booky mural, probably 20 feet big, like long, right? This picture of an angel, wings, at this place. It's a trampoline park, I guess, because it's some sort of connection to flight. Dude, we'd been going there for 6 months. I'd never seen this thing before. One day I just look up and I go, oh, holy cow. My life is like that. Visually, experientially, I'll go, whoa, life. Like, did you know? Did you know that if you get really, really quiet, it can be amazing? You're not bored? I had no idea. It's just this endless discovery of being. And I don't think it ever ends because I don't think being ends.
No. I Our conversation makes me wonder how it translates to people who in some ways are going, I don't even know where to begin
I know.
being. And so just for sake of time, and
Yeah.
I know it's really hard to put into a nutshell, but if you had to tell somebody one or two things, like how do you begin to translate this in practical ways of what someone could do today, what would you tell them to at least begin making an initial step, Jeff?
I totally feel that, right? Because I remember I remember a part of me, 5, 10 years ago going, just tell me something to do. And I know that there's a part of me right now that's like, I just need to figure, like, I've got problems. I've got things that I want to fix or
Yeah, and I need a
transform.
plan, right? Give me a plan.
I need something to do. And I get it. Like, we are doing stuff. I think instead of giving advice, I just share what it felt like for me, which was um, I'd spent my whole life denying myself, thinking somebody else had the answer. And I had some ideas of what I thought it could be, meaning, what should I do with my life? How do I be happy? How do I feel successful? How do I do the thing where I feel like I'm not wasting my life? I was really afraid of wasting my life. And I realized I wasn't so much wanting to be good as I was just trying to not be bad or get in trouble. And there was some vague something, a parent, right? This was a very innocent, childlike version of me that was like trying to get it right so that the invisible parent could come say, good job, son. But I'm an adult man, who's like making millions of dollars a year in this business that feels chaotic and scary to me. And I'm spending a lot of money and making a lot of money and selling books and just trying to keep this thing going. Meanwhile, I'm going, but this doesn't feel good to me.
Mm-hmm.
So two things that were scary, but eventually became inevitable. One, I just thought, maybe I know something. Maybe I know something about my own life that somebody else doesn't know, that the pastor doesn't know, that the parent doesn't know, that the spouse doesn't know, that I know. And maybe I can start to trust that. And so I began to have a conversation with myself. We're already doing this. We just don't realize it. You're saying, you've heard the phrase, you got to look yourself in you got to look at yourself, look at your life. Who's looking at what? There is a part of you that is aware of you, right? This is what meditation is about. You sit
Right.
down, you breathe, and you go, oh, I know that I'm thinking right now,
Yeah,
right?
I'm the observer.
Yeah.
Right.
But behind that is the awareness that there is an observer. I'm the
Mm-hmm.
observer. Who's the observer? I am. Who? Exactly. And you just keep going. And that gets you into a space of just going, oh, interesting. And you could just kind of play with that. Like literally it's a game. Um, so who are you behind all the, if you dropped all the stories that you tell about yourself, who would you be? What would you be? And um, play with that cognitively, mentally. And then a thing that I found really useful. So I just started trusting myself, meaning trying micro experiments of going, I think I want to do this. Okay, I'll try that. And the thing I wanted to do was like go for a run in the middle of the day. Like rarely are our instincts to immediately burn down our life, but maybe that's it. Whatever it is, try something small. See if you can begin to earn your own trust. That's one thing. The other thing, and that was very liberating to me, I realized that I could trust myself and that I would make mistakes and I could trust that I knew when I made a mistake. And I didn't need all of these ideas of goodness to be good. I could start getting into reality, experiencing life. Oh, when I do this, bad things happen. I should not do that. or if I do that, be prepared for those bad things. The other thing that I think is really good and helpful and not necessarily at the forefront of our mind is some sort of bodily practice. And for me, it's not meditation. I can sit and breathe and it's fine, but I got beat up a lot as a kid and made fun of, and I got a lot of body shame and a lot of stuff to work through and express emotionally. And so the most natural thing for me to do is walk, to just go for a walk, 1, 2 hours at night, in the morning, in the middle of the day. Walking is a somatic experience. It gets your right brain and your left brain talking to each other. It will
Right.
bring up emotion. It does all kinds of good stuff for you. Thoreau he considered it a waste of a day if he didn't walk 4 to 6 hours a day. I started walking not to exercise, just think, to get into the feeling of being. Those two things are very liberating for me. Micro experiments in self trust, because religion, a lot of society kind of conditions you to not trust yourself. Don't trust yourself, trust me, trust us, trust our rules, do these things, you'll be okay, right? Trust God. Who's God? Well, this is what God looks like, and this is what God told you to do. So trust that, and then you'll be okay. Just play with the possibility that there might be something trustworthy inside of you. You can always go back to the other way of being. Like, you can always go back. And then movement was really, I still like, walking is my spiritual practice. And you'll
I like
notice
it.
stuff. Yeah, you'll breathe, you'll
Well, and
notice
it's going to
yourself
be,
walking. It's good.
I think what you said is good because it's going to be different for anyone who wants to at least explore,
Yeah.
right? But, and for me, um, I do enjoy my meditation and my silence, which is different for me. And I'm learning to trust myself. You know, sometimes I think that's really sad that I'm just learning to trust myself when I've been asking other people to trust me for a long time. So
I don't think
I
so.
know,
Yeah, because they only know the projected performer part of you.
sure.
And you know that's a lie. And so there's a part of you that's going, I don't trust you. Well, you shouldn't, because he was faking it. He's a liar. and
Yeah,
and
the
it's
imposter syndrome, right?
yeah. And I mean, that's disintegration, right? Parker Palmer talks about this in the hidden wholeness, and the goal is to just start moving these pieces back together. Your true self and the egoic self, the thing that we project. It's not bad. That thing was a hero. He kept you alive. He made you money. He got you acceptance, which probably felt like love for a long
Well,
time.
that's the egoic's job, right? Is to protect
Yes,
me and keep me alive and, save me from myself.
it makes sense that it would take time and lots of small efforts over time for us to integrate those parts of ourselves that have become disintegrated over a long time. You should earn your trust. You wouldn't expect somebody to just trust you out, from the outset. It would take time and lots of micro efforts of doing what you said you were going to do. That's been a wonderful revelation for me to even allow the dissonance in myself. You know, I don't trust this part of me. I'm scared that I'm going to screw it up. Well, of course.
I think to wrap up our conversation, I love the word micro
Yeah,
because I think people need small,
totally.
significant
Yeah.
steps. And maybe the first step for them today is just to even the fact that you listened. If you listened to us the entire time and you're even pondering the possibility of something different, that's a micro step.
Yep.
Just even open your mind to consider. Um, Helps people move to being, learning to be authentic and the freedom that comes with that. So I um, I want to thank you just because I've learned. I love having conversations where I learned something, and not only have I been encouraged and affirmed, but I learned something new today. And so, thank you for imparting that to me. Thanks for sharing your story and your journey openly and honestly, because I think that's where we learn. We learn from each other by not pretending we've got to be something different. And so, um, I loved it.
Thank
I
you.
loved it.
My pleasure.
Thanks a lot.
You're welcome.